A dark house, a woman alone, a man with a knife. It all began with Halloween, but the night he came home is not over yet. Jamie Lee Curtis, Donald Pleasance, Halloween 2. A Halloween treat. The trick is to survive. Halloween 2, rated R, under 17, not admitted without parent.
Hello, listeners past, present, and future. This is the Haddonfield Radio Trailer Park, where we take you moment by moment and frame by frame through the trailers that make us want to go to the movies. We are your hosts. My name's Christian White.
And I'm Joe Francazio.
And here we are again, back with another couple of Halloween franchise trailers. Very excited to be here. Episode 3 of the Haddonfield Radio Trailer Park. Thank you all who have listened to the first 2 episodes. And if you are just tuning in for this first time, what we do here is we take a look at different movie trailers. We break them down for you. Every other episode of this series, we take you through multiple trailers from the Halloween franchise, which of course we've been focusing on here on Haddonfield Radio for the past year. Joe, why don't you let them know exactly what trailers we're going to be talking about today?
Sure, we're going to be covering the Halloween 2, the original Halloween 2 from 1981, and Halloween 3, Season of the Witch from 1982.
Very exciting. Certainly 2 of my favorite Halloween franchise entries. How about you?
Yeah, I love them. Obviously, I think there's a lot of love and hate for Halloween 3, but I think Halloween 2 is generally accepted as a good sequel, and in many cases, some people prefer it over the first.
I actually think a lot of that sort of residual distaste for Halloween 3 has sort of eroded away as the years have gone on. And
yeah.
I think, as we talked about, we if you don't know, we do full fan commentary episodes on all the Halloween franchise films over on our other series, Haddonfield Radio, which you can find right here on the same YouTube channel. And in episode 3, we talk at length about Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, and about its history, lore, and legacy. But obviously, if you're a fan of this series, you know that it's been a bit of a rocky road for Halloween 3 over the years. When it first was released back in 1982, it was met with a lot of confusion and, like I said, a lot of distaste because the producers, John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, chose to omit Michael Myers, Laurie Strode, Dr. Loomis, and the entire burgeoning Halloween mythology and try to turn the franchise into more of an anthology. But like I said, as the years have gone on, it has really come around for this film, directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, and has found its own little niche, both within the franchise's history and just as a very cool horror film on its own.
Yeah, it kind of fits in the cult classic,
yes,
category nowadays.
Exactly.
And like you said, I think it is slowly becoming more and more beloved by the fans. I know it took me a while. At first, I was in that camp of just like, I don't get it, doesn't fit. And then the more you watch it, and the more I kind of grew to love the whole Halloween series as a whole, I love it. Halloween 1, 2, and 3 are just my favorites out of the whole franchise. It's a perfect sort of trilogy. For me, 3 sort of just perfectly fits. I don't know. It's hard to describe. I don't see it as this sort of
like redheaded stepchild.
Yeah. To me, it fits because
I think so too.
And it's not just the Michael Myers thing, but there's just a tone, a feeling. I love how it retains sort of the look and feel that the first 2 had, and so they kind of all go together in their production values, which I love. And Tommy Lee Wallace, the director, he was a big part of Halloween 1, or the original John Carpenter's success. And
the third one really has that getting the band back together vibe.
Right. Yeah.
And it's almost the entire production team from the first 2 films coming back together. And like you just said, it definitely shows in terms of the production quality, in terms of the atmosphere, the stylization. All that is kind of explicitly the same as Halloween 1 and 2, even though it's not narratively connected. However, if you go back to our Haddonfield Haddonfield Radio episode 6 and 7, Joe and I both came up with 2 separate theories that, when put together, as far as we're concerned, we found a way that you can put Halloween 3 into Timeline 2. And Timeline 2, of course, is Halloween 1, Halloween 2, now would be Halloween 3, Halloween's H2O, Halloween Resurrection. Correct?
Yeah.
Yes. And if you want to find out more of why we feel it fits in Timeline 2, just go check out those episodes. Now, I was thinking about something. No, go right ahead. You go first.
Well, I was going to say, now to back up a little bit with Halloween 2, I thought it was interesting that, the gap between the original Halloween in 78 and then Halloween 2 being 1981, you have that sort of 3-year thing that was very typical for the 80s. I feel like it was just a standard, like in terms of movies that were going to have sequels and be connected. It was always like a 3-year wait between when you would get another one. But then, they did that sort of thing where they tried to hop on the success of their franchise, and Halloween 3 comes out only a year later. I feel like if it come out just a little after, maybe it would have done a little better, a little more time to disconnect from the Michael Myers series.
I totally agree.
I know
with
they want to capitalize on their audience, right? But I get that from a business point of view. But
to give it a little bit of space to separate itself in the consciousness, in the public consciousness.
Yeah,
and I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And this was also very much in the early days of sequels.
Oh, God, yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, I'm not saying that The Godfather 2 was the first sequel of all time, but The Godfather 2 is really where sequels, as we know it now, were born. You had serials that came before that in cinema.
Well, we
sure.
also had The Empire Strikes Back had come out a year before Halloween
exactly.
2. One of the biggest sequels.
And what's so interesting that you bring that up in the connection there, that I was thinking about, of course, in Empire Strikes Back, you bring George Lucas brought in this familial connection, where you find out that, of course, Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father, and then you see in Halloween 2, John Carpenter brings in this familial connection that goes on to sort of define the entire first timeline. This idea that Michael Myers and Laurie Strode are in fact brother and sister. Which ended up being much the chagrin of John Carpenter in the ensuing years afterwards, even though he was the creator of this concept.
Right.
Now, going back to Halloween 3, there's something that occurred to me when I was prepping for this episode that maybe other people have thought of in the past, but it sort of really occurred to me and gelled in my mind. Another thing that might have made it more palatable to audiences back in 1982 would have been if John Carpenter himself had directed Halloween 3. Now, I'm not saying I dislike or anything disrespectful to Tommy Lee Wallace's direction, which I think is actually one of the best parts of Halloween 3. But I think in terms of public reception and audience reception, I wonder if John Carpenter himself had directed it, if it would have made a little bit more of a difference in tying it into the franchise more formally.
I think if you look at the advertising from back in the day, they were definitely being deliberate in trying to include his name as much as possible because he was a producer, he did the music, like his name.
Oh, he was over
involved.
Halloween 3.
So I think if they definitely try to keep his name mentioned as much as possible. And in doing my research for this, I was actually watching some of the TV commercials, and from back in the day, and there was one I thought it was very odd that they literally said like a film from John Carpenter, which they're really riding a line there. Like, yeah, he produced this, so I see why you can say that. But when they're almost kind of also misleading you into thinking he directed another one.
It's interesting going back again to Empire Strikes Back and even Return of the Jedi and the Star Wars franchise.
Right. Well, that's true.
Those two films were not directed by Lucas, and yet they were presented to audiences very much as from the mind of George Lucas.
I think to this day, a lot of people would still think
I'm sure
he directed those
I'm
movies.
Absolutely positive of that.
But now, Tommy Lee Wallace, being the sort of everything on the first movie.
Oh, he played so many roles. He was behind the scenes. He was so important to the 1978 original that you can't really undersell that notion.
So I think having him direct 3 was actually the perfect choice, no matter what the box office was and stuff. I think it would have been worse if it was somebody else, because he kept the connection, production to everything, and at least you could maybe audiences could pick up on that. But he gets a lot of slack. But I think he did an amazing job. With
I
that
agree.
movie and everything.
I don't make any mistake. I bring that up almost as the idea of Carpenter directing it like a devil's advocate proposition. I really love the work Tommy Lee Wallace did, and interestingly enough, I think we mentioned this in our fan commentary episode of Halloween 2, but Tommy Lee Wallace was originally asked to direct Halloween 2.
Right.
And the only reason he decided not to, or opted out of that idea, was because the actual job description for directing Halloween 2 was specifically to emulate the work that Carpenter did in the first, since Halloween 1 and Halloween 2, of course, are connected almost directly and are set in the exact same night. So and that's what Rick Rosenthal did, I think, very, very beautifully in Halloween 2.
It's a great segue. So now let's talk about the advertising for Halloween 2, right? So now they took the tagline of the night he came home, and for this one, it's more of the night he came home.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So I think they're trying to be. It's kind of silly, but they're trying to be they're trying to make it clear to the audience that this movie is still the Halloween night that we left off on in the original. Now remember, it's 3 years have gone by. It's
in terms of our world.
In our world, right? So that you kind of have to reintroduce everything to everybody through a trailer. Now, when the first movie was made, the idea of a teaser, a shortened trailer, which is like 30 seconds long, maybe a trailer is more like 2 minutes long, really wasn't so much a thing. But now by Halloween 2, we have a teaser, and we're going to show that too.
Yeah, we're going to cover the teaser and the theatrical trailer.
And so now we're starting. It's interesting with the Halloween franchise. You can see the entire evolution of like the trailer and teaser world happen as they keep evolving over the years with it. So now Halloween 2 comes out. It's 1981. We've had a lot of big hits, obviously The Empire Strikes Back, Jaws.
Well, and not to mention 1982 was probably one of the most legendary years for genre films, action films, horror films, sci-fi films, literally in film history. So those early 80s were just jam-packed with indelible classic films.
And Halloween 2 has like one of our first Halloween teasers, and the teaser comes out so early, usually once they know they're going to make the movie and they want to get people revved up. So they tend not to have direct footage from a movie. Sometimes something might be shot specifically just for the teaser, just to give you something to see. And in this case, they must have filmed the pumpkin in the beginning, splitting open to reveal the skull. Must have been like the first thing. As soon as they knew they were making the movie, they probably said, well, we know we're going to do the credits. Like the first movie, it must have been one of the first things they filmed, because it's basically what they used to make the teaser. It's just a slow push in on that with the theme coming up.
And it's one of my favorite. Obviously, the Halloween franchise has some incredible opening credit sequences, and the Halloween 2 pumpkin opening to the skull is certainly one of my favorites of the entire franchise.
And then they continue to use that in the trailer too, along now with footage from the movie. But they heavily relied on that pumpkin revealing the skull for most of their TV film advertising. Right. And so you see the beginning of the teasers starting to pop up with these movies. You'll see it with Halloween 3 when we get there. There's also a voiceover with the Halloween 2 trailer, which starts becoming more and more prevalent in trailers, starting, I think, pretty much with the Jaws teaser. Yep. Again, they were one of the first ones to do a teaser where it was just the footage in the ocean with the music and a voiceover, and
where it's not directly imagery from the film. It's its own little promotional material created to simply kind of whet the palate of the audience.
Yep. And it tests the waters a little bit, right?
Right.
They get an instant reaction to what people think about them making a sequel, which was big back then.
Why don't we take a look at the teaser trailer for Halloween 2? Why don't we throw that on right now? We'll all watch it together. Now, unlike our Haddonfield Radio series where we do the fan commentaries, we're not going to be talking through these trailers. We're all just going to watch these trailers together and these teasers together, and when we come back from it, Joe and I will discuss it. So why don't we start with the teaser trailer? Don't you think we should do that? The teaser trailer for Halloween 2.
Here we go.
People who brought you Halloween. More of the night he came home. Halloween 2.
And that was the teaser trailer for 1981's Halloween 2, directed by Rick Rosenthal. A very concise, a very specific, and very atmospheric teaser that, to me, I don't know what it doesn't matter how many of these movies we've watched this year and covered. Every single time I hear that specific music, that John Carpenter music, I just want to watch nothing but Halloween movies.
That must have been huge in the theater.
Oh my God.
When you show up and all of a sudden that, because people probably had no idea. With it being a teaser, there's probably been no press yet about them making the movie. And then that comes on the screen after the first movie being the hit that it was. Oh my God.
And
people
I love
must
that
have lost
the
it.
skull itself is a very almost cartoonish looking skull inside the pumpkin. It's not like a realistic looking skull.
But I love the way there's almost like a skin that's being peeled off of it too inside as the pumpkin opens.
And
It's
if you notice,
clever.
like the skull, like the what do you call them? The orbital areas, the eye areas of the skull. There's like an open area between the two eyes. So it's a very stylized looking skull inside the pumpkin, and yet it's just so cool. I absolutely love it. Mm-hmm. Whereas the imagery that's used, it's right on the screen we're looking at right now on the what edition are we watching right now?
This is the Fair Factory editions of the movie. So we have the Halloween 2 bonus section.
The pumpkin in the menu screen has a much more traditional skull, sort of coming out like as though the skull's part of the pumpkin.
Right.
But the one that's in the teasers and the trailers and even in the movie opening credits themselves is just so stylized looking and interesting. I don't know. I think that's a very effective teaser in its simplicity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's exactly what it's supposed to be. Just a tease. Give you a taste. It's using some of the updated theme with the more synthy sound with Alan Howarth now involved with John Carpenter doing the music. So, they're giving you the pumpkin, but with a skull.
It's really cool.
They're giving you a little twist on some of the things you recognize, even though there's very little going on, but put it all together with the voiceover. And it's going to come out the day before Halloween. My God.
Going back to what we were talking about earlier, the idea that this movie takes place on the same night as the 1978 original, well, that's a very tricky proposition in many ways, because in so many ways what could have happened if it wasn't directed well, if it wasn't written well, is it could have just felt like an addendum to the first movie, and not like a movie that stands on its own 2 feet with a beginning, middle, and an end of its own.
Right.
And I think even though we can all possibly agree that while Halloween 2 may not be exactly as good or as iconic as Halloween 1, it still is a very effective slasher film, horror film, that Rick Rosenthal does an incredibly admirable job of kind of subverting his own style to emulate Carpenter's, but at the same time bringing something new to it and something fresh to it. What do you think?
Yeah, I do. I wonder if the film would have worked as well if you didn't have someone taking the approach of having to sort of copy the Carpenter thing.
I mean,
and if they just got to if they try to do the story but in their way, geez, you got to wonder. But because maybe the reason this works at all is because you feel like you're just still watching more of the original because it is supposed to be the same night.
Well, certainly, like the first 20 minutes of Halloween 2 is almost just identical to the last 20 minutes of 78 Halloween.
And you'll see when we show the trailer in a second, they're very much, now they're giving you chunks of the movie, and they're letting you know, I think very clearly over and over that it's that same night, and we are still there, and they're giving you as many shots that are emulating direct shots from the first movie. They want the audience to feel comfortable right away when they're watching this trailer and know that we are putting you back there,
as I was researching this movie, something I read that really was interesting to me, that really speaks volumes about the time period in that, like you mentioned, that 3-year gap in our world between 1978's Halloween and 1981's Halloween 2. Yeah. Well, obviously, a lot had changed in terms of horror movies in those 3 years because of the influence of the 78 original.
Right.
And the interesting thing is when Rick Rosenthal delivered his initial cut of Halloween 2 and showed Deborah Hill and John Carpenter as the writers and producers, well, Carpenter immediately said, certain sequences of this need to be reshot because they're not violent enough, not bloody enough. And he felt that it wasn't going to be able to keep up with the way that the horror genre and slasher genre that was like growing from Halloween 1978, so much had changed in that short 3-year period of time. Even though the 78 original, of course, is a very austere and very almost a bloodless affair, but Carpenter himself directed a few additional moments that had a little more explicit violence.
But as much as that whole thing about the first movie being bloodless is looked at as a positive for it, and it is, don't get me wrong.
Yep.
I do think that it was more out of necessity due to budget constraints.
That makes sense.
Right? Than more of an artistic desire. I mean, I know there was talk between them. We don't need it to be gory. Okay? But they also didn't have the money to make it gory. So you wonder if now when Carpenter has a little more say in money that if his vision was always to have it a little more like what he did with the H2 stuff.
Right.
I don't know. Right. I'm just sort of spitballing. But
well, I think before Halloween 1978, the kind of high watermark for horror was reaching something that was like almost a Hitchcockian style. And I think Alfred Hitchcock really dominated what we would call thrillers or horror movies before Carpenter released. Even before, like, I'd say it goes back a little bit before that with, like, Bob Clark's Black Christmas, Tobe Hooper's 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Ridley Scott's Alien, John Carpenter's 78 Halloween. That's where horror really started to change out of that Hitchcockian mold. And I would argue that the 1978 original Halloween is very much more in that Hitchcockian mold, whereas the Rick Rosenthal Halloween 2 is much more of what was turning into what the slasher genre was becoming at that time.
It must have been weird making 2 where you have to copy something you didn't necessarily mean to do in the first one.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
Like, they created a sort of genre and a feel and a look from just what they naturally were making and what they had as resources to make it. And then all of a sudden you have to do part 2 and you're saying, well, we got to do more. And now you have to kind of maybe define a little bit more
100%.
What you're doing to make sure that it's going to match or look like what they did before. That must have been a little...
going back to that same thing I mentioned earlier about Halloween 3, I wanted to ask you, do you feel that this movie would have benefited or been any different if Carpenter himself had directed it?
Oh, it would have definitely been different. Let's put it that. I mean,
so even if, because as we all know, Carpenter and Deborah Hill wrote the script. So you still think the film would have been?
Well, because you wouldn't have had the whole concept of we need to copy Carpenter. He just would have been making one of his movies.
So how do you think? So you think it would have been substantially different?
The guy who's in charge, your director, isn't following Carpenter's pattern. He is Carpenter.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean.
He gets to just be artistic. He just gets to make his movie. He's not, you know, maybe he's going to be concerned about the cameras and lenses and things to look the same, but he's just, you know, and we know Carpenter.
Yeah,
he
that's
doesn't
right,
bow
yeah.
to anybody.
Yes,
well,
exactly.
to a certain degree, you know what I mean? He's not going to just say, okay, I'm going to copy what I did because you want me to. If you want me, you're going to get Carpenter, but because
I just find it
you know,
endlessly fascinating when spending this last year studying this franchise, the kind of give and take of Carpenter's connection to the franchise that he gave birth to.
Right.
Now, if it was me and I had made Halloween 1978, I would have wanted to continue it myself. And he
think
is the
about
main
this.
storyteller of Halloween 2.
But think about it. It was forced upon him.
No, you're right.
He only wanted to make part one. Their whole, you know, it's the old story. They didn't envision anything besides of that. Hopefully he used
it's
that
not like,
to get clout to make his next movie and
yeah,
so on and
it's
so on.
not like
and so
Halloween
on.
1, like you're saying. It's not like Halloween 1 was his passion project.
It wasn't.
Or Deborah Hill's passion
No.
project.
I mean,
they were
even-
hired guns.
Even with this, he talks about, you know, he was half drunk and he hates the sister idea that he
yeah, I
incorporated
think he said
into
Bud
it.
Light was his
Yeah.
co-screenwriter on this.
So, yeah,
But that's just, I think, Carpenter also being self-deprecating, and I think that's something you see all through his career. And when he's being interviewed, he can be very crotchety.
It's an answer to the press when he's probably getting asked a million times about, like, you know, why did you pull the old Luke Leia thing, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
And a lot of, a lot of the interesting things to me about Halloween 2 is that when they had to release it for a television audience, they needed to pad the runtime. And so Carpenter himself also came in and directed a lot of these extra scenes that sort of really explored I'm thinking of the 1978 original,
Right.
he had to pad it, and there were some scenes that hinted at the fact that Michael Myers and Laurie Strode were brother and sister even back then in those extra scenes.
Yeah.
And so
He's
it's not like these notions were new to him when he was writing the script for Halloween 2, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So it's just so interesting to me that as soon as the movie was created and was actually out in the world, that he suddenly wanted to distance himself from that notion. And certainly this notion that defined, centrally defined the movies of Timeline 1.
It could just be a film writer getting older and looking back at past decisions and maybe going, I probably could have done that
Yeah,
better.
I think you're right.
You know?
No, that's true.
And if he really was binging beer all weekend when he was writing that, you know, I mean...
And it was written very quickly,
maybe
Halloween
that
2.
is also, you know...
I don't know. I love it. I love Halloween 2, where I've mentioned in the original episode we did for Haddonfield Radio, our fan commentary. That was the first time I ever personally saw Michael Myers. Back watching Halloween 2 on WLVI TV 56.
Yeah.
Probably the 8 o'clock movie.
Yeah, me too.
And that was the first time as a young kid that I ever saw Michael Myers. And so this movie always does have sort of a nostalgic place in my heart, and always will. But why don't we take a look at the actual trailer,
Yep.
and then we'll discuss that. So let's all watch what was the original theatrical trailer for Halloween 2.
I shot him 6 times. I shot him in the heart. This man, he's not human.
Universal Pictures presents Halloween 2. More of the night he came home.
Who is it?
There was nothing within him, neither conscience nor reason, that wasn't even remotely human. This is some kind of a joke. I've been trick-or-treated to death tonight. You don't know what death is.
Janet, go tell Mr. Garrett we're having trouble with the phones.
There is no place to hide. He will always find you.
What's this? It's a Celtic word. It means the Lord of the Dead.
Mr. Garrett?
the night he came home.
And we're back. That was the theatrical trailer for Halloween 2, of course, directed by Rick Rosenthal, released in 1981. You know, something I love about these vintage trailers is I love that you actually can see the edits.
Of course.
You know,
yeah.
and it's like that film kind of that vintage film editing feel.
It's funny you bring that up, because when I was doing the research for this, I wish there was more information out there about who actually edits
I would
trailers.
love to know. I really dug around online. I can't find much of anything.
You can't find a lot.
It's crazy.
I don't know if it's just a no-name guy giving instructions, like put this shot, then this shot, then this shot.
Like, is it a marketing team person? Is it Carpenter? Is it Rick Rosenthal? Is it Deborah Hill? Is it all of them? I wish that there was more. It's so funny you bring that up. 'Cause it's such a good thing. Good point.
In the earlier years, like we talked about when you had Kubrick, Hitchcock, those guys, they were very much involved with the
marketing of their films, yeah,
and cutting it. They were the first ones to say, "Whoa, let me cut it myself. Let me make it my own thing." I mean, Hitchcock used to make a whole trailer out of just walking through the production of the movie while it was being made and stuff like that.
Kubrick,
right?
he literally made his own trailers himself.
Right. So, but at this point, I wonder. I don't know who's doing it, and I am curious about who puts it together. I love that first, whatever it is, 10 seconds of just black.
Oh, yeah.
With just screaming and the gunshots.
I love it.
I
It's
mean,
so evocative.
It's also like you don't know what the hell's going on, right? I mean, right away you're sitting there in the theater. It's just black, and you're hearing that, and it must be startling. You're grabbing audience's attention. It reminds me also a little bit of the Black Christmas trailer with those sort of jump cuts to just blah, total screaming,
yes.
just hitting the audience with some chaos, audio chaos, and then as we go on, I notice that they are totally, at least it feels like to me that they're using as many shots as they can that are emulating the first movie or feel like the first movie. Him picking up the knife, him walking slow, girls in trouble. I thought it was also interesting how little Jamie Lee Curtis, though, was featured in the trailer.
Well, that just brings me to one of the points I was going to make, when watching this trailer and preparing for this episode. The interesting thing about Halloween 2, the 1981 Halloween 2 we're talking about here, is the way that the screenplay sort of sidelines Laurie Strode. Now, what's really interesting is you would think that much like, let's say, like James Cameron's Aliens is a good example.
Yeah.
Whereas Ripley in Ridley Scott's Alien is certainly not the lead role, it's an ensemble. But because of the nature of the development of the character in Alien, by Aliens, of course, James Cameron puts her front and center.
Yeah.
And the same exact thing happens in Halloween, except it's completely opposite in Halloween 2. She's sidelined, and then Donald Pleasance's character of Dr. Loomis really becomes the subjective perspective character of Halloween 2. And subjective perspective storytelling is so integral to the DNA of the Halloween franchise. So the person or the character that you're following through each one of the movies, well, that becomes extremely important. It's just unbelievably weird to me that it wasn't a continuation of Laurie Strode's story.
I think they knew, I would guess, that they knew that if they jumped right back into him chasing her, that it would have been a little too much. There had to be a build up, like him taking out it gives them the writing vehicle for him to do other things too. What kind of chaos can he cause on his way to getting back to Laurie?
Right.
And you're right. They do give Donald Pleasance more of a front and center. And it's weird though, because when you look at the credits that's at the end of trailers and everything, like Donald Pleasance at this point, I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis's name is still above his.
It's still like the way I was noticing in the way that they present the credits at the end of the trailer.
They're like side by side,
Yet
but they're
hers
also
is up higher.
Is up higher, right?
And it's almost awkward looking, to be honest with you.
Well,
and I guess thematically speaking, Laurie Strode is central to the narrative of Halloween 2.
Yeah.
But in terms of, again, like the perspective that you're following through Halloween 2, I think you're clearly following Loomis's perspective.
Well, some of this could have been business at play too, where, she was becoming a bigger star.
Right,
she didn't want to get totally like looped into staying in horror, so they probably had to give her a good deal, and I bet she wanted some top billing.
And I mean, don't get me
you
wrong.
know.
She's a very tangible presence in
Yeah.
Halloween 2. I'm
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about
Oh,
Laurie,
yeah.
Laurie Strode.
Sure.
And Jamie Lee Curtis
It's not
as an
she's
actress.
not in it, but you definitely, it's a slow build and little bits before we get to the point where she's running around the hospital, which is where we really start to get her story going.
A couple of other things I was thinking of. This trailer sets up something that becomes important to thematically in Halloween 2 that goes through the rest of Timeline 1, and that's the idea of Sam Hain.
Yeah.
And of course, the correct pronunciation, as we all know, is Samhain, but I'm going by the pronunciation that's presented in the film, Loomis's presentation of the word as Sam Hain.
Yeah.
And in this idea of this kind of pre-Christian, pagan, Celtic iconography that goes through the rest of Timeline 1, and very importantly, certainly deeply informs episodes 4, 5, and 6, the Cult of Thorn trilogy.
Sure. Well, I think it's also they're trying to give the audience a little bit of information that might explain how we're still following a guy around that's been shot a bunch.
Yeah,
and all that.
they
Like,
tried to bring dimension to Michael Myers' mythology, and I actually really like this idea and this dimension, but a lot of people, were on the fence about it, and
Sure.
to this day.
Yeah.
And that's understandable.
Yeah, and they don't dwell on it in this movie.
No.
But I think
this is where the seeds are planted.
It just gives you a write-off for the question of like, well, how is he human? He's not human. But you can say, well, clearly there's other things at play here.
It introduces the potential to utilize a supernatural aspect going forward.
Right.
I think, like I said, it's only like the seeds of this are planted in Halloween 2.
Mm-hmm.
But with Michael Myers scrawling that word across the chalkboard, and of course Loomis's very iconic speech about the history of Sam Hain and its connection to, or his believed connection, and all that, it definitely becomes a thematic counterpoint that allows you to create new stories going forward. And they certainly did. Whether you feel that the Cult of Thorn storyline is successful or not, I believe that all that you see in 4, 5, and 6 sort of is born from those seeds that were planted here in Halloween 2.
Sure.
And certainly in Halloween 3, which we'll talk about in a minute when we cover that, there is definitely a lot of that same conspiracy themes, cult
ancient
themes,
evil.
exactly.
Right, yeah.
Timeline 1 is sort of really defined by these two thematic preconceptualizations that you see in Halloween 2 and 3. The idea that Michael Myers and Laurie Strode are siblings, and that there is these, like again, these Celtic or pagan conspiracy or cult angle that kind of draws forward, going forward. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, here we have Halloween 2, which is in, of course, the Haddonfield Memorial Hospital setting. Now, I love that setting for a horror film, the hospital. However, I can't be the only Halloween franchise fan that wishes there was a Halloween film that had been set inside of Smith's Grove.
Oh, God.
As a setting. And almost like having like the Arkham Asylum. If you follow the Batman comics, the Grant Morrison and Dave McKean graphic novel called Arkham Asylum, where Batman and the Joker are, the whole graphic novel is set inside Arkham Asylum.
Right.
Well, I sort of wish there was a Halloween film that was entirely set inside Smith's Grove.
If you remember with Rob Zombie's movies, when they were talking about doing a third, one of the ideas that got really close to being made with the idea that when it picked up, we would see that Laurie at the end actually gets up and kills Loomis before.
Oh, yes.
So she
Halloween 3D, I think
right,
it would have
and
been.
so
Patrick Lussier.
Michael was going to go to death row.
Okay.
Right, and you were going to follow him in prison there. It's kind of similar, while he's sort of locked up, and you were going to see Laurie in Smith's Grove.
Oh, wow.
And I guess somehow the two are going to meet there. I don't know how, but obviously a little similar.
It's just strange
that
that
you're focusing on them being more incarcerated. Maybe somebody has to sneak in because they want to. It's the old reporter that wants to, get a glimpse of Michael Myers and then.
But you could have created
let him loose.
this entire like almost rogues gallery of supporting characters that could have existed within the confines of Smith's Grove.
Yeah.
It's almost amazing to me. In case you're a listener from the future, we're recording this in 2023, and as of 2023, there are 13 films in the Halloween franchise. It just sort of amazes me that in 13 films, nobody set one entire film inside Smith's Grove. You actually see, if you think about it outside of the Rob Zombie films and in a little bit in the David Gordon Green films, you see very little of the inside of the inner workings of Smith's Grove.
That's what was kind of so cool about David Gordon Green's when you got in there. That was the most we had seen really inside.
And it's really tantalizing in his films.
Although, wait a minute. The one with Paul Rudd, Halloween 6.
Yeah. You're right. You're absolutely right. And before everyone starts commenting of what an idiot I am, which is categorically true, I will say, and I always do forget things like that, really things I spent a year watching these movies, and yes, I probably should have remembered, but yeah, of course, like, again, you're seeing either glimpses or scenes or even sequences. I'm talking about an entire film.
Like starting with Michael while he's in prison there, you know, and then maybe
ending with him getting out.
Hey, we always say we are not experts, we are simply fans.
Only fans
having a chat, watching
Don't get mad at
these
me.
movies.
If you have any hate mail, please send it right to our comment section.
Should we move on over to start talking about H3 here?
But before we do that, because you just brought something up, I just want to say, like we always say, if you've been listening thus far to this episode, I just want to say thank you so very much for watching these trailers with us. Joe and I always say this and always take a couple minutes of every episode we do, regardless of whether it's the Haddonfield Radio series or the Trailer Park series or whatever we do going forward. We appreciate you guys so much for being here and listening to this with us and reaching out to us. And if you have something you want to add or something we get wrong, like I just did, and something you want to or you want to add to the conversation, please let us know in the comment section. We read and respond to all the comments. We do our best to respond to them, but we absolutely do read all of them. And it's always so exciting to hear your knowledgeable, creative, brilliant points of view. And we love hearing stuff. So please, if you got something, if you know like information about, for instance, like we were talking about earlier, who created specifically these trailers, please let us know. Joe and I, we collect information on these movies. So please, if you know stuff about the creation of these trailers, the production of these trailers, let us know. We love hearing that stuff.
Yeah, in a minute, I do have a specific question I'm going to ask for the audience for H3 that I'm hoping somebody can help me with. But
so yeah, before we go into the teasers and trailers for Halloween 3, I just want to say we really love you guys and appreciate you guys. And if you enjoy content like this and episodes like this, please, if you haven't already, just do us a small favor and just hit that subscribe button, just so that we can keep in touch with you and let you know when future episodes of both the Haddonfield Radio Trailer Park and our other series, Haddonfield Radio itself, when those episodes air. And just so we can build this community here of other fans. We love reaching out to you and we love watching these movies and trailers with you. So with that said, thank you so much for tuning in. I know you guys have very busy lives just like we do, and that you would take time out of those busy lives to support our creativity. It really honestly and sincerely means the world to us, and we really appreciate you. So yeah, anything else, Joe?
No, just thank you guys.
Thank you very much. We do love you guys, really. It means a lot to us. So yeah, let's continue on. We're going to go on to the teasers and trailers for Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Tommy Lee Wallace.
Next season 2, I'm going to be looking for a different co-host that can remember the movies that we're covering.
I have a hard time remembering the films we've literally spent an entire year obsessing over.
I'm kidding. All right,
and it's like I haven't watched them yet.
I'm kidding.
So yeah.
All right. So H3, right? Let's talk about this for a second. Again,
let's get into
when we talk about now we have a teaser as well for this movie, right? And it's almost like the same sort of thing they did for H2, where we're just doing a slow push in on the witch mask with the spider crawling out of the mouth.
This is
the teaser.
Okay,
this also ends up in the trailer. But here's what I think is interesting. Excuse me. But I'm wondering if there's information out there. This is actually one of two questions. So I know there was a new book by Tommy Lee Wallace all about the making of this movie. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I do plan on it.
It has a very bizarre title.
Yeah,
I think the title is actually "Where the Hell is Michael Myers?"
There's been lukewarm reviews about it and everything, but either way, I'm hoping there could be some good information about it.
It looks like almost like a self-published, like an independently published book, and I think that's awesome.
I think when you can get any sort of information about these movies out there, you should do it. But
any fan, and it's a shame we haven't yet, and we will, but all the fans should be supporting that book and ordering it. And I'm one to talk. I haven't done it myself, but I'm going to tell you, between now and when we record episode 13 of Haddonfield Radio, show where we cover Halloween Ends. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm putting my promise out there, I'm going to order that book.
You probably get it at the con, too.
Oh, yeah, we might be able to get it at the con, but I'm going to get that book.
Anyway, so this witch mask thing, to me, it feels like, again, something that they shot early on when they knew they were going to make it. And I'm wondering if that was, like, originally they were like, hey, we have to do something like the pumpkin. That's an H1 and H2. And they kind of just jumped on that and they filmed it. And obviously they use it in their marketing, but then it doesn't actually show up in the movie. They went with that digital credit sequence,
Which I love.
Oh, it's great.
I love that.
But
digital.
I'm so curious.
It became very iconic, that opening credits of Halloween 3.
I'm curious if the original idea was to mimic H1 and H2 with instead of the pumpkin on the side with the credits, we had the witch mask, and that's why they originally shot that early on.
Well, it's
and
more
then,
like,
and then maybe it got scrapped.
I think you're right. I think the connective tissue in the presentation of the marketing is a lot more tangible by doing it that way. And yet, I do think that, like you were just saying, the opening credits that exist in Halloween 3 with the digital pumpkin, I think actually I love that even more in terms of its, at once being its own thing, but also tying back into the first two movies.
I get, because you can reintroduce the pumpkin in a different way, and I get why. I agree that was better, but I am wondering if the witch was shot just for promo stuff, or was it originally going to be the opening of the film as well?
If you guys know the answer to that, please let us know in the comment section.
Now, the other thing I want to talk about before we watch these is, as you watch the teaser and then the trailer. This movie, it's now 1982. We are starting to get, it's the dawn of the, or at least recognizable voiceover actor.
Oh, yeah.
In a world. Right? So this movie has, for me, like, it's the first the Halloween movies that has one of these guys that I remember from my youth being all over everything. And when I was trying to do a little research, I was really trying to figure out which guy did this because it's so recognizable. But then when you start listening to all these guys, like, side by side, they sound very similar. So I narrowed it down to the four guys. There were four major guys who were
that were doing the narration on the trailers,
on
right?
all movie trailers, even in TV commercials.
That classic
the network
trailer,
singer,
that iconic trailer voice.
So there was a guy who's often attributed as the godfather of all these guys. His name is Don LaFontaine, and he actually does do the voiceover, I know, for Halloween 4.
The trailer for Halloween 4?
Yeah, he does the voiceover for the trailer for Halloween 4. But he was also all over everything, and he's the guy that a lot of the time gets the credit as literally the guy who invented the in a world where, because he got to write a lot of the stuff for his trailers.
Snakes and bugs come out of Halloween masks.
But now there was another guy, the second sort of most well-known guy was Hal Douglas, and there's actually been a little bit of I think competition online. I've noticed over like which one of these guys actually came up with the "in a world" line.
Oh wow!
Right, but it seems like the Don LaFontaine wins.
So wait, let me interrupt you for 1 second.
Yeah.
So there, it isn't actually known who did it for Halloween 3?
I couldn't find it in my research.
Okay, gotcha.
But also, I think that the guy, if people listen to this H3 trailer, and and people who know a little bit more about this time period and other horror movies and can connect the dots, will be able to probably tell me who it is. Because it's one of these four guys. Ready? Here's the list. It was Don LaFontaine, Hal Douglas, Percy Rodriguez, or Adolf Caesar. Those four guys, if you looked up those names and listened to the trailers that are, you just go on YouTube and you type any of those four names and listen to their trailers, you will recognize all of them, all the way up until like now. These are the four guys. Now, I think most of them have passed away by now, but they were, up until like the early 2000s, they did everything you heard. And what
an interesting fun fact that we could make right now to say, after the conclusion of World War II, Adolf Hitler started doing voiceover for movie trailers.
But let me talk
I find that utterly fascinating from a historical vantage point.
We're really getting canceled now.
Well,
No, listen, so you're talking about Adolf Caesar. I know, listen to that guy's name.
What a combination of
I know, he took two really horrific
historical figures. And I know what I'll do with my life. I'll do cool voiceovers for movie trailers.
But listen, so besides,
If your name is Adolf Caesar, you should be a world leader, or you should be like a conqueror, not a movie voiceover, movie trailer person. Anyway, go ahead.
he, as well as being this major movie trailer voiceover guy, if you looked him up, he acted as well in movies. A lot of these guys did, and you would recognize him in a heartbeat.
Right.
Adolf Caesar, and then I think Hal Douglas were actors I recognized when I saw pictures of them from movies as well as their
So these guys
work.
were also actors.
At least two of them were.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
And the big guy, Don LaFontaine, he did everything. Like, he used to produce movies. He used to be in some of the early westerns. Like, he started in the 60s.
That's very interesting.
He had a production company, and then he used to do the voiceovers for his own trailers that his production company was doing.
Oh, wow.
And then it got to the point where he was just made a living off of doing voiceovers. He closed his production company, and he might be the guy from H3. It's hard for me to tell because they all.
So if you had to guess out of those four
I know,
guys,
hold on.
If you had to guess out of
was
those
my
four
paper?
guys, what would be your guess? And it would be an educated guess because you've done this much research. I didn't know any of this, so,
It's. I think I gotta pin it down to two. I can't go down to one.
Okay, go ahead.
It's either Don LaFontaine or Percy Rodriguez. That's what I think.
I'm going with Adolf Hitler. Personally.
Womp, womp, womp.
Yeah, anyway. That's just my guess because he was so prolific.
Okay, but anyway.
9999. Sorry. Go ahead. Continue on.
As we get through the teaser, which is just the witch's skull, the witch's mask, with now this, we're seeing the recognizable voiceover actor.
I gotta be honest, I don't think I've seen this Halloween 3 teaser trailer yet.
Oh, it's interesting, and then
this is going to be new for me too.
It also shows back up the mask in the trailer for it as well,
which is very interestingly similar to the Halloween 2 way that the teaser and the theatrical trailer sort of combine those two things.
It's only been a year. It's a lot of the same people.
Right.
And again, I think some of 3 being made was a product of just trying to capitalize on 2 also, making money for the studio, right? Let's get it done and let's do a lot of the same things.
When you think about the trailers now, like the modern trailers, when you see these trailers, it really does. I hate to sound like an old person, but I do miss like this old classic style of movie trailers versus the sort of like manipulative trailers that you see in modern movies.
Yeah.
Like, I like these movies that just give you the face value, what you're getting into. This is what the movie is. It's not like taking you down a road that you're going to be halfway through the movie when you go and see it and you're like, what is this?
And so when we're done watching the H3 trailers, I'm going to give a little bit of information sort of about that. Every time we do these, I try to give a little history on trailers, right?
It's all good. It's new to me too.
But what I'm going to get to is it really comes on the heels of H3, so I think we should finish talking about that first.
So should we jump right into the teaser trailer for Halloween 3 Season of the Witch? The teaser trailer. Should we do that one first?
Right now.
All right, so here we go. We're going to be watching the teaser trailer for Halloween 3.
Season of the Witch, the night no one comes home.
And we're back. That was the teaser trailer for Halloween 3, and I've got to say, I absolutely loved that teaser trailer.
It's great, right?
That is so... First off, that music is its own thing. I wonder what that music is from, or who composed that piece of music.
It's kind of like Jaws, right? It's got that...
Well, I just love it, and I love how the eyes appear on the inside of the mask, and...
See, that's why
it's so creepy.
I mean, it could have been made just for promo stuff, but I have an inkling that it might have been an early idea for the opening of the movie too that got scrapped. But the spider crawling out, they just had to do something different.
Oh, I loved that.
And instead of it
really
like cracking
effective.
open, the eyes pop. pop out, you know?
And another thing, while we were watching that, Joe brought to my attention that I was sort of had my mind blown by, is that in the movie The Last Starfighter, that actor, what is his name? Do you remember his name?
Oh, God.
Let me look him up.
Richard O'Hurley?
No, Dan O'Hara.
Dan O'Hara, yeah.
That was, of course, from Halloween 3. He also was in The Last Starfighter playing Griggs, or Grig.
And that movie was directed by Nick Castle.
And also starred Lance Guest from Halloween 2.
A lot of connections to The Last Starfighter.
I just did not realize that he was under that alien makeup.
Yeah, that's him.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about movies.
So, like I said, I'm taking applications for a new co-host, people.
You know, when you co-produce and co-host a YouTube series about movies, I would my advice to you, if you're going to start one yourself, is you should probably watch some movies first. I obviously have not.
And I only recently became aware that Nick Castle directed that while we had been, doing research for these Halloween movies, and I loved The Last Starfighter as a kid.
You know, another movie, just as a tangent, that Nick Castle directed that I used to watch over and over again is that Damon Wayans movie, Major Payne.
Oh my God, that was him?
He directed that.
Yeah.
And I used to watch that. We used
it was funny.
On the weekend nights when we were, my brother and I were younger, and my parents would like leave us with the babysitter. That was always like, a perennial rental. We would always rent Major Payne. We probably watched that movie 100 times. Yep, Nick Castle, believe it or not.
So now we get into the theatrical trailer, and
that teaser is just so effective.
So it is. It's great. I love the swirl, the way it starts. Every time it comes on, my mind immediately goes to the Twilight Zone opening for a second, seeing that.
Yeah, I see that.
That swirly circle and the music, but then.
And it's funny to me that, of course, in Halloween 3, the three iconic masks of the witch, the jack-o'-lantern, and the skull. And yet the witch is really the most prominent one. As a matter of fact, speaking of the marketing of Halloween 3, on the iconic Halloween 3 movie poster, that creepy witch's face.
Well, it's called Season of the Witch, so I think
exactly.
they focused on the witch mask for the marketing anyway.
Because that witch face, when I was younger, even before I think the movie was something I knew when I was a young kid, that witch imagery from that poster always used to really stand out in my mind as very frightening to me as a kid. Oh. That creepy witch face. So
the way they add the eyes in, composited in after. That's so creepy to me. It just reminds me of all those old 80s movies that would composite stuff like that. And although obviously an effect and kind of fake, it's just freaky. I don't know. It's
that
freaky to me.
Compositing is just a lost art of cinema that really has a real kind of visceral feel to it.
It's a chemical process.
Right, exactly.
With physical film that creates all that, and that's just not part of filmmaking anymore.
You can't get that tangible, that alchemical feeling from CG that you get exactly from that chemical compositing. It's just so cool and so effective and freaky and spooky, and it works so perfectly in terms of the marketing of a film.
And then when we get into the trailer, I feel like you'll notice that they, now we got the footage from the actual movie, along with they're still using that witch shot of the mask from the teaser still in the trailer, kind of exactly like how they did H2's trailer, and I think they're trying to make it feel as much like the other two as they can without. I mean, the fact. Well, they don't have Michael Myers, but they still use the slow walk of the androids,
like Dick Warlock and the other android security guards. I believe definitely were probably meant to have a very Michael Myers vibe to them.
Yeah.
And it's not overt, of course, with the exception of the fact that the main one is played by Dick Warlock, who obviously played Michael Myers in Halloween 2. But there's so much in the physicality and the body language, and certainly in how they're used as characters, that I think is supposed to feel like a subtle kind of Michael Myers element.
Yeah. And they cut in as many of the stabs and slashes or gore or screams or freak out moments or even small cuts of action where in the trailer it might look like something bad has happened to somebody, but in the movie it's just a jump scare, like it's their friend touching their shoulder, not an evil guy. But in the trailer, so they're definitely trying to give you this feel that this this movie is, just it's going to make you jump just as much as the originals.
And yet it has more of a more of like not really explicitly violent movie, but it has definitely more kind of gnarly effects created by Tom Berman.
Well, it's like this is a horror movie.
This is a
you know what I
horror
mean?
movie, even though it has strangely has a lot of sci-fi elements to it.
Yeah, but I mean, like the genre that they are now, like they are now part of a genre that wasn't quite there in '78. You know what I mean? And now it's part of a thing that is...
A couple interesting things, speaking of those sci-fi elements. If you follow the history and the making of this film, Carpenter originally approached a very venerable, well-known British science fiction author named Nigel Neal to come up with the original concepts and ideas for how to take the Halloween franchise into what was then the computer age, the early computer age. And Nigel Neal, of course, created this Quatermass, which was a British sci-fi horror franchise that came before this. And he did bring a lot of the themes and concepts that carry through into the finished film, but strangely enough, he didn't agree with the Tommy Lee Wallace rewrite of his original script or the direction that the film was taking, and he had asked Carpenter to take his name off of it. But a lot of the thematic and direct elements that make up Halloween 3 came directly from Nigel Neal's imagination and give you that kind of little bit of that sci-fi kind of weird angle.
Yeah, I think I remember a famous quote from Deborah Hill back in the day was that it was, Halloween meets the digital age.
Right,
Which,
right.
Now that we talk about that, I think it's interesting to see at least in these advertising. I got to think about the TV commercials, but like they don't really play on that at all. This is more about scare and being a scary movie than trying to show any sort of thematic digital Halloween meets the digital age thing.
Really, with the exception of maybe the Silver Shamrock Factory sequences and the opening credits, the digital pumpkin. I think you're absolutely right.
But I mean, even in all this advertising, you can't pick up on too much of a digital age
certainly not
thing
in the advertisement. Certainly not.
They're not hinging on that at all.
No.
Which could be a Tommy Lee Wallace thing, since he was...
I think it might have felt a bridge too far.
Right.
Even from the first two.
Now, I am wondering, did audiences, when they saw the trailer for this movie, or even teaser, I mean, teaser must have been harder to judge, but after the trailer, did they know that it wasn't going to have Michael Myers, even though he wasn't shown in the trailer? You know what I mean? Like, was it obvious to them?
Look, I remember.
Or are they wondering, is he in a different mask, maybe?
I could be wrong about this, but I honestly think I remember back to when we were researching for episode 3, where in Haddonfield Radio episode 3, of course, we do a fan commentary deep dive on Halloween 3. And I think I remember that audiences, when they sat down in the theater when this movie premiered, I think many members of those original audiences did think that this somehow was still related to Michael Myers.
Right.
But this is the pre-internet age, and back then you had maybe Famous Monsters in Filmland, and you had like Fangoria, and that was about it if you were going to get any preconceived information about these movies. So I don't know 100% for sure if that's accurate, but I think that people did think that. From the trailer, I don't think so.
Were they convinced at all, one way or the other? Was there still hope that somehow this connects? Yeah, I gotta wonder. But
one more quick thing. Did you know that originally, the director that was originally approached to direct Halloween 3 was actually Gremlins director Joe Dante? Did you know that?
No.
Well, see, there's one thing I know that you did.
There would have been a lot more stop motion probably going on in this movie.
Yeah, and probably even more of a elevated kind of a subversive, humorous tone.
Yeah.
But just an interesting little fun fact.
For sure. And so, in terms of like the trailers and the history of trailers, and there's not, besides for me, the notable addition of the recognizable voiceover guy, this still follows pretty much the mold that they were using for Halloween 2.
For the marketing of the original 2 films.
It's just a lot of screams, action, a lot of loud sound, a lot of making people realize that this is a scary movie.
Making sure people know what genre you're getting into. Yes.
It's weird, when we were watching like the trailer for the original movie, and we were talking about the early days of trailers, we kind of mentioned how they were more or less like cliff notes of a movie. It was like a condensed version, like it gave you sort of the bullet points and walked you through it a little bit. And this one, now we're getting trailers where you're getting a lot of scenes, but you can't really piece it all together. You know what I mean?
I agree with you.
They almost are giving you stuff so makes you want to go watch the movie to see what the hell that was all about. Where the early days was a little more of
it shows a bit of a indecision as to whether or not the anthology idea was in fact a good idea.
Well, but it's even I guess Halloween 2. No, it's not Halloween 2. But I thought it was interesting when I watched this one that you see, like at the end they give you the explosion of the plant right in the trailer. But knowing that you don't know what the hell it is when you're watching the trailer, it's just there to show you that we have explosions.
Yeah, right. But it's like here's some production value.
That the shots are now being shown for other reasons than to just give people an idea of what the story is.
I'll tell you what, for the people who haven't seen it yet, let's go right ahead and let's watch the Halloween 3 Season of the Witch theatrical trailer so that we're all on the same page. We're going to watch it together and then we'll discuss it when we come back.
You don't really know much about Halloween. Halloween, the barriers will be down between the real and the unreal. And the dead might be looking in. The last great one took place 3,000 years ago when the hills ran red. Halloween, the children.
You happen to know anything about this Cochran?
All I can tell you, mister, is watch out. He's watching you, friend, I guarantee you that.
Trick or treat. Hey, Mr. Cochran, just what is the final process? Fellas, I was just kidding.
Witchcraft. To us, it was a way of controlling our environment.
Hey!
Where are they taking her?
They're taking her to the factory.
I want a mask. Can I have a mask?
Just what I had in mind for you, little buddy. Why, Cochran? Why? Do I need a reason?
I've got nothing here to indicate there was ever a body at all.
Operator, this is an emergency.
I do love a good joke, and this is the best ever. A joke on the children. I'm glad you'll be able to watch it.
You've got to believe me.
They're going to kill us. All of us.
Stop it!
The world's going to change tonight, Doctor. Happy Halloween.
Stop it!
Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, the night no one comes home.
Season of the Witch.
And we're back. That was, of course, the theatrical trailer, which must have been released sometime in 1981, I would imagine, right? Now, really quick, there's that indelible argument that's gone on for decades whether this movie would have been more successful if they had simply called it Season of the Witch.
Right.
Because by the time the title card comes up, especially when just watching that theatrical trailer, and it says Halloween 3, you must have been like, wait, what? Halloween 3?
Yeah, but if it worked, then you would understand why, because they're going to do an anthology, right? And they want to just keep having a marketable thing, Halloween.
Just using Halloween as the central conceit.
So it's easy now when a movie is a kind of conceived or looked at as a flop that say, well, what if we had done this or that? So who knows? But, I kind of forgot that they do give you Cochran's whole speech explaining a little bit of what's going on, so that you have an idea that that maybe this isn't Michael Myers. We're talking about just creepy things happening on Halloween night.
If you're able to extricate your preconceived notions, your expectations from the first two movies out of your head, and you're going just by the film on its own merit, even just the trailer of its own merit, well, that's a very good trailer.
Oh, I love it.
And I would want to see that movie.
Right, exactly.
But I was trying to watch that trailer that time as though I was in 1981.
Yeah.
And I know that when that said Halloween 3, that would have thrown my ass off.
Sure, of course.
It would have thrown me off.
Yeah.
But I will say an interesting thing that I was looking at when I was researching both the trailers for Halloween 3 and the movie itself, and you see it in the trailer right there. Tom Atkins, of course, the actor that plays one of the most iconic characters of the whole franchise, regardless of what people think of Halloween 3 over the decades, Dr. Chalice, which now I think anyone that's a fan of this franchise would agree, certainly one of the most iconic characters in the franchise's history. Tom Atkins, as the actor, he has maintained all these decades and all these years that he believes that Dr. Chalice was successful in saving all the kids from being killed by this plan.
Interesting.
Now, I actually disagree with
Yeah,
that.
it's funny you say it because we actually just had a listener comment just in the last 2 days about how they love the idea that it maybe in one of the later Halloweens that you could have done a reference to some 82 event where there was a mass, killing of kids in horrible,
where like even
very unexplained event.
Even if 100 kids died, I mean, it would be it would be an event that would be in the annals of history and in annals of true crime.
Yeah.
And so to have included that even as a Easter egg or something in one of the subsequent films, even somewhere in the Cult of Thorn movies, because the Cult of Thorn films, of course, are just laden with this conspiratorial themes and cult themes that you could have kind of woven these events and woven Halloween 3 into the architecture of Timeline 1.
Yeah, it's another way you could have tied it all together.
It's just very strange to me, especially in chapters 4, 5, and 6, Halloween 4, 5, and 6, that they never somehow, like you said, just added in some sort of little bit of a throwaway.
I think there's for so long there was just the thought that Halloween 3 just has nothing to do with anything.
It didn't work, and it wasn't successful.
It just wasn't part of the whole.
And so let's distance ourselves from it.
We don't need to look there for Easter.
But retroactively, all these years later, I mean, I think it really, number one, stands on its own 2 feet as its own sci-fi horror film, and also, even though it wasn't directly directed, in other words, by John Carpenter, it certainly has that Carpenter-esque 80s vibe.
Sure.
100%.
Well, it's made by his best friend, one of his best friends.
Yeah, and he was directly involved, but it definitely
there's a lot
is
of influence
in
there,
that Carpenter vibe, that 80s Carpenter vibe.
I love in the trailer how you can hear Tommy Lee Wallace doing all that whispering, trick or treat.
Oh, that's Tommy Lee Wallace. I thought that was really cool.
His little announcer voice that he does with the from the commercials. And did you hear the voiceover guy, right?
Yeah,
it's that recognizable. Now, this is one of the guys we start hearing a lot all through the 80s and 90s, and I'm curious if anybody knows which of those 4 guys I mentioned earlier.
If you know which of those 4 guys specifically did the voiceover for the Halloween 3 trailer, please let us know in the comments
section. I'm just so curious.
Well, that was a lot of fun watching all these trailers.
Hold on, now, can I just talk a little bit? So now, when it's 82, right, when this movie comes out. So when this comes out, there's a major thing in talking about the history of trailers that starts to happen, and this actually ties into one of your more favorite franchises, Evil Dead.
Right.
Okay? So if you go back, and then trust me, this is all going to tie in together. In 1977, Sam Raimi, who was a college student, he and Bruce Campbell, they make a short film called It's Murder. They show it to people and they like it, and they kind of say, you know what, you should make a feature. And he goes, well, I like that, but I have a better idea for a feature, but I need money to do that. But before they do that, they make another short called Within the Woods that gets shown before Rocky Horror Picture Show, and it kind of is like history from there. From there, they're able to raise money to start making what would be the feature film he wants to do, and that is The Evil Dead. I think when they were first filming it was called Book of the Dead, right? And then they switched it to Evil Dead, right?
Which was strictly a marketing decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he kind of probably had to follow by their rules a little bit at that point, as he was a new filmmaker, getting to make his first feature. And so there was a little process that got to be known from what he did there to get his movies made within the filmmaking world. Now, you gotta remember, Evil Dead also came out in 1983 and it was second to E.T.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it was big.
absolutely.
It was bigger than, it was kind of like the way Halloween probably became bigger than they thought. They didn't think this was going to be big. So now we want to fast forward to, there were 2 other brother filmmakers, the Coen brothers. And when they were starting out, the whole the whole way they got their movies made was by following the template that Raimi used, but they applied it to trailers. Instead of short films, they said, let's do what Raimi did, and let's make trailers for the movies we want to make, and sell that. And with that idea was born the idea of trailers for things that don't exist, and then they were actually able to use that to raise like $500,000 to start making their first movie, Blood Simple, and we can go on and on and on and on.
And Raimi and the Coen brothers were really connected all through those early days. They were working on each other's films.
Exactly.
Essentially.
The Coen said, wow, that worked. Let's do that. But they did it all in the form of a trailer, which for them, they were just trying to get their movie made. But what it did is it started a new thing with trailers that you'll see creeping up. And as we probably get further along in this franchise, there'll be evidence of it happening where you're filming more than just like The Mask or a pumpkin as a teaser or something. You're filming something separate from a movie.
You're making like a little short film of its own.
But it's a trailer. You know, it's just a trailer. And so anyway,
just a quick little piece of personal detail, like you mentioned how much I love that franchise.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s when I was in high school and going into film school, Joe and I both met at Emerson College in Boston Film School. My touchstone director that was like my director that I was obsessed with during high school and into college, the reason I basically went to film school was Sam Raimi. I was completely obsessed with Sam Raimi. The Evil Dead films, really everything he ever did. Darkman, which, I hadn't watched Darkman in a long time, and I watched it again about a couple of weeks ago, and man, that movie is it's a Universal film too, and it's so much like a classic Universal horror film.
Right.
Have you seen Darkman?
Not in a while, but I used to watch it a lot when I was younger.
So
I loved
incredible.
it. I loved it.
I know I'm on a
Liam Neeson.
tangent here, but
anyway,
you brought up Sam Raimi, and I just thought, well, that made me think of that.
Yeah, and I know my little spiel there was a little off subject,
No, was it?
but in the world of we're talking about trailers and what's about to happen.
I love that.
Right after Halloween 3, some of the blockbusters that come out and are going to start being influenced by these younger guys who are being very inventive.
These sort of like independent genre directors that were coming up and just kind of doing it by their own rules.
The trailer became a tool now. It was now something that a filmmaker could make without it having to be a whole movie, and it could be enough to then sell your movie.
Yeah, that's how it was sold. That's how you get your financing.
And that's not how you used to do it. You know what I mean?
It used to be once you had the film being made, or even made, you would cut a trailer from those materials.
So once there was
almost like a reverse engineering of the original process of marketing.
Right.
It's like reversing that process.
See if people will buy the thing before you make it. Right?
Absolutely, 100%.
So anyway, that's about to be on the cusp of things, and I'm sure we will see that popping up as we go forward.
And if you didn't know, we're going to be covering every single trailer from the Halloween franchise in chronological order. And we will be doing that every other episode of the Haddonfield Radio Trailer Park. So, for example, this is episode 3. So for episode 5, what we will be doing is we will be doing our special Cult of Thorn Trailer Park episode, where we will be covering not just Halloween 4, the return of Michael Myers, not just Halloween 5, the revenge of Michael Myers, but we will also be doing Halloween 6, or just Halloween, the curse of Michael Myers. So episode 5 of the Haddonfield Radio Trailer Park will be our Cult of Thorn episode. Mm-hmm. We will be releasing that in October.
We haven't picked the next 2 movies for episode 4, but don't worry, they will be...
And every other one, what we do is we're going to be doing so for episode 4, for example, and every other one, we'll be doing a vintage and modern trailer episode. So 1 vintage trailer and 1 modern trailer. But again, we haven't decided on what we're doing for episode 4 yet, so it'll be a fun little surprise.
If you have suggestions, throw it out in the comments.
If there are trailers you want to see us cover, just let us know.
Coming out or
we'll
something old,
We'll do it.
Yeah.
Let us know. There are a lot of... Actually, 2022 was much like 1982, like just a banner year for horror movies. So certainly a lot of great trailers to choose from last year, and a bunch of great horror movies that have come out in 2023 that we could cover.
Yep.
So if you even vintage trailers, if you've got older horror movies that you want to see us cover the trailer and research the trailers for and talk about those movies, just let us know, and I can almost guarantee you we'll do them. So we plan on doing this series on and on and on, and even after we run out of Halloween movies, I will say this without saying too much. We have another season of Haddonfield Radio planned that we're going to be doing once we finish the Halloween franchise, and we will be probably doing the trailers for those films too. So we'll be making that announcement, I think, when we do our episode 13 of Haddonfield Radio, where we cover Halloween Ends.
Yeah, we finally figured out what we're doing.
We're going to be making the announcement as to what we will be doing for season 2 of Haddonfield Radio, and I think of a lot of you guys that have been following along so far will probably be really happy with this decision. So, yeah,
anyway,
we'll be talking about that then. But this was a blast.
Yeah, these are always fun to do.
I love going through these vintage trailers, man. I love it. And I love seeing how the trailers for the Halloween films really kind of mirror the evolution of the films themselves. Mm-hmm. And it certainly, as we go forward, we'll see that. And next time when we come back and do the Cult of Thorn episode in October, episode 5, we'll see how those trailers sort of mirrored that mini trilogy in and of itself.
And if you guys have also noticed, when you're watching these videos, whenever there's radio spots for any of these movies we're covering, I try to add those in the beginning.
Yes,
and
yes.
I usually tag one at the end. So
those are vintage radio spots from the marketing of these films.
So as long as there's stuff for me to find out there, I try to throw those, at the beginning and the end of the video. So check those out as well.
Yeah, and if you like this series we're doing and you find this interesting and fun to listen to, just let us know. If there's something we could be doing better with it, or something that you think would work better with this series and make it more palatable or interesting to you, let us know that too. Don't be afraid. If you've got something constructive, a negative constructive comment, don't be afraid to share that. We're not afraid of that. Anything we can do to make this more interesting for you guys, we're doing this to reach out to other fans.
Oh, be gentle. So, don't make me cry.
Yeah, I know. Joe's very sensitive. I've got a very thick skin. I'm like a crocodile. I've got thick skin. But Joe is very, very sensitive. He weeps.
Hey, really quick though, one correction from this episode.
Oh,
this
is important.
We kept calling the DVDs that we're watching from Fear Factory.
No,
Factory.
What idiots?
It's Scream Factory.
Scream Factory.
And those are the DVDs we tend to watch.
And they've been super nice to us in the past, and we didn't even get the name of their company right.
Yeah.
We were thinking of the old Joe Rogan series, Fear Factor.
Fear Factor.
I don't know what the hell happened there. We both said it. Neither one of us caught it.
I know. Well,
until we saw the menu screen for Halloween 3 when we were going to watch these trailers. Like, oh, wait a minute, it's Scream Factory.
Anyway.
If you got one thing out of this episode of Haddonfield Radio Trailer Park, it's that Joe and I are both morons. That's the one thing you probably got.
It's amazing we figured out how to record our own voices.
Yeah, this is just crazy.
Right.
But yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Thank you guys.
Anytime Joe and I live to make these episodes and to reach out to you guys and share this stuff and watch these movies and trailers with you guys. So please just understand that it means so much to us that you're here listening. We love you guys. We appreciate you guys sincerely. And we hope to meet a lot of you guys coming up in September, at the end of September, beginning of October, of course, at the Halloween 45 Years of Terror Convention in Pasadena.
We will have a booth.
We have a booth there. We're going to be appearing there all weekend. And if you're going to be out there, please stop by and check us out.
We're going to be broadcasting live to a certain degree.
Yeah, we're going to be live streaming.
Selling our first ever merchandise while we're out there, meeting fans, taking pics, hopefully meeting some stars from the movies.
If you're a fan of the Halloween franchise and you're at that convention, please stop by our booth and say hello. And if you don't know, we have an Instagram page. If you go on Instagram and you search Haddonfield_radio or hashtag Haddonfield Radio, you'll find our Instagram page. It's a very lively fan community there with a lot of lively debates in the comments section. And we also do this cool, like, Michael Myers kill list. We've been doing these chronological entries where we cover every single kill Michael Myers ever committed in chronological order. We're up to like 53 entries. So if you want to check that out, you can find it over on our Instagram page.
Yeah, they're done like in the style of the old trading cards, you know.
Yeah,
with the
they're really
photo
cool.
and-
They're really cool. And if you check that Instagram page too, getting closer to the 45 Years of Terror convention, you can find out the live streaming schedule that we're going to be doing when we're appearing there at the convention.
Yeah, as we get closer, there'll be a lot more info coming out.
But we'll be back next time actually with episode 13 of Haddonfield Radio, where we cover the final, as of 2023, the final film in the Halloween franchise, David Gordon Green's trilogy capper, Halloween Ends. Very divisive, very controversial film. I'm sure we'll have a lively conversation, lively deep dive there.
Buckle up for that one.
Yeah, we'll be back next with that, and then after that, we'll be back with episode 4 of the Haddonfield Radio Trailer Park with content to be decided. So, until then, I just want to say one more time, thank you so much, and we love you. And if you're out there listening, we appreciate you, and we hope you'll continue listening to us here at Haddonfield Radio. And until then, anything else you want to add?
Just thank you to everyone listening.
Yeah, we love doing this. This was a lot of fun. We'll be back next time with our Cult of Thorn episode of the Trailer Park. So that'll be episode 5. So next time we do Halloween films, I mean. Anyway, until then, I'm Christian White.
I'm Joe Francazio.
And have a very happy Halloween.
First, there was Halloween, the night he came home. Then, the terror continued with Halloween 2. And now, prepare yourself. Universal Pictures presents the all-new Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. The night no one comes home.
Happy Halloween.
Rated R, under 17, not admitted without parent.